Hi, thank you so much. Thanks, Julie, so much. My name is Trish, but formally Patricia, but I like being called Trish. I am the executive assistant at Lagbara Ltd. Apart from that, I am also the curator for the virtual assistant course. So, if you have any questions to deal with virtual assisting, I'd be happy to help. You can just reach out to us on the Lagbara's email that I'll share later on. And let me just say, I'm happy to be here to learn as well, because I'm also here to learn. You never know, I might want to go to the US. So it's going to be a good opportunity to learn and to understand more on the funding and visa situation. So thank you so much.
Awesome. Julie, very much. Yeah, my name is Missy Leuthold. I'm the Assistant Director of International Recruitment here at the University of Northern Iowa. We are a medium-sized public university located in Cedar Falls, Iowa. We have around 9,000 students on campus, around a little over 200 of them are international students, and we're always trying to grow that population. And so that's why I was honored to present to you today about some different funding opportunities for you to consider if you're thinking about studying in the States. And then just touching base on like after you've decided what university and kind of a little bit about the visa process. So please feel free to answer or to ask questions during and we can get to them at the end or anything like that. But hopefully you find this information helpful. So yeah, so what we're going to talk about today is just funding your education and what the visa process might look like as well. So excuse me. I think the most important thing to understand is that studying in the U.S. is not just tuition and fees, right? So when you're looking at universities, there are a lot of other things that you need to consider when you're looking to study in the U.S. So starting with the application process, right? So thinking about application fees, like does the university offer a waiver or can you defer the fee and pay it at a later date? Does the university require an SAT score or an IELTS score or Duolingo or anything like that? Because that's going to be a fee. Then more of the expenses for the university, right? So tuition and fees, room and board. In the US, health insurance is mandatory, that all students and citizens essentially have to have health insurance. And then you have to think about the cost of traveling to the US, right? And then well, I'll touch on this more later, but the visa and the SEVIS fees in order to even apply for your visa is going to cost you some money. And then same with like making sure that your vaccines, there's certain vaccines that universities require you to have in order to participate in classes, and then obviously any of your books and supplies. And that's really just for school, right? And then you want to take into consideration your personal expenses while attending college, right? So any of your personal hygiene, anything that you want to do for fun, go to the movies, go bowling, anything like that, going out to eat, but then also expenses during break, like if there's other places in the US that you want to travel. So that just is trying to create a bigger picture or a holistic picture of what the expenses might be when you're thinking about studying in the States. Something else to consider when looking at universities in the US is going to be the location. So, like I said previously, the University of Northern Iowa is located in Cedar Falls, and the cost of living in Cedar Falls is actually below the national average. So your cost of living, it essentially is like cost of housing, cost of food, transportation, different things like that. And so the cost is going to be a little bit more expensive on the East Coast, the West Coast, Florida, Texas, the Midwest, which where we're located. So we're right in the middle of the country. and so like I said, our cost of living is going to be a little bit lower than any of the major cities. So things to consider too, right? Like obviously geographic location, but then urban versus rural. So the major cities like New York, LA, Dallas, Atlanta, like all of those are major cities. So your cost of living is going to be significantly higher. Then also your lifestyle. Like, do you like to save money? Do you like to spend money? Do you like nice things? Do you buy coffee every day? Even a cup of coffee in Cedar Falls is probably going to be less expensive than in one of those major cities. And then the last thing that I just have listed here is the cost of living calculator. So it's something to um, look at based on where you're considering studying in the US, and what might be a good fit for your budget. So, as far as scholarships, so I would say the majority of US universities do offer some sort of scholarship. So, there are different types of scholarships. So, this is specific to undergraduate students. So, if you're looking to study for your bachelor's degree, this is what is going to help you qualify for those scholarships, or what to look at for those scholarships. So most universities offer merit-based scholarships, and what I mean by merit-based is that those are going to be given or awarded to you based on your academics or based on your extracurriculars. So if you have a good grade point average, then there's scholarships that will automatically be awarded to you. Same thing with the SAT. ACT is probably a little bit more specific to domestic students, but it's very similar to the SAT. Um, so some universities might award scholarships based on that. Um, and then, different extracurricular activities, like I said. So if you're into the arts or music or even athletic ability, those are things that you can look into. Like UNI is a Division 1 school, and so those athletic scholarships are going to be really, really competitive. However, there's other divisions or other universities that might have a little bit more flexibility in their athletic scholarships. But like to segue into the next bullet is just like, obviously all of these scholarships are very competitive, so I would recommend doing your research early and applying for scholarships early. So, for example, our deadline is February 7th for undergraduate scholarship applications. And so some of those applications have already closed, even for fall 2025, right? There's other universities that do need-based, so they're going to look at your family's financial situation and award financial need based on that. And then we also do have some universities do departments. So depending on what you're interested in studying, if it's biology, computer science, business, like the specific departments might also give you specific scholarships. One thing, and I think Julie sent me the questions from today too about full tuition scholarships. Very, 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 very few US universities offer full tuition scholarships. And if you want to talk about being competitive, those full scholarships that some universities might offer are going to be extremely competitive. The difference about like UNI though is that you can add your scholarships together. So say you got a scholarship based on your GPA, and then you got one based on your extracurriculars, and then you got a department scholarship. Those can be added together so you can stack them, but it's still only going to be partial and not fully funded. This is just a little bit more information on those need-based. Need-based isn't anything that UNI does, but again, something that you could look at when you're exploring US universities. They'll probably ask you more for your financial statements from your family to see what your annual income is and things like that, and what your family's ability is to pay for school expenses, and then maybe award funding based on your family's overall financial situation. As for graduate funding, so again, graduate funding at UNI is going to be partial funding. We don't offer full funding for graduate students either, but there are different opportunities again to get funding. So they come in the form of graduate tuition scholarships, graduate assistantships, and research grants. So the two most popular among our graduate students would be the tuition scholarships and the graduate assistantships. And so like with the graduate assistantships is essentially you are working for a department on campus. You're working for 20 hours a week doing either teaching or doing research, or like we have graduate assistants working in the admissions department, and so they help us a lot with recruitment and processing, paperwork and different things like that. The nice thing about the graduate assistantship is, like I said, you can work on campus, but then it also, the funding you would receive is essentially, it awards you funding to receive in-state tuition. So the tuition cost for graduates is approximately 23,000 as an international student, but if you were to get a graduate assistantship, it would drop that tuition down to around 13. So something to look at. Again, I know for you and I, we received over 1,000 graduate applications. And so again, that funding is extremely competitive. So I encourage you to do your research early and apply early. Our graduate funding priority deadline is February 1st. So again, we have students that are reaching out still for the fall, but unfortunately the funding has already been allocated to students. Things outside of the university. So the scholarships and the funding that I just mentioned are specific to UNI, but things to explore are going to be outside of the specific university you're interested in studying at. So, do some research online, see what free scholarship databases might exist. Maybe there's private scholarships available within your community, or maybe if you're a grad student and you're working, maybe your employer is willing to sponsor you in some capacity to get your bachelor or your master's degree. And then always explore like nonprofit scholarships that they want to invest in education, and then to government entities usually have, or our country's government usually have some sort of scholarships to invest into their education as well. Other things to consider, again, looking at holistically of what funding may look like at or for you. A lot of our students do take out private loans, especially students in Nigeria and Ghana, and then also India. Taking out loans for an education is very common in the US, especially for our domestic students. I would say the majority of our domestic students take out loans, and so that's something that you could consider. Then also, thinking about like what previous coursework have you done that you might be able to get college credit for towards your degree, and that would be able to lessen your length of your bachelor's degree. So like say, you've taken IB courses or A levels or AP courses, anything that we could grant you college credit for. A bachelor's degree is usually around 4 years. And so if we could grant you credit for at least a year of college, then that saves you that whole year of expenses. So thinking about that as well. And then another cost saving tip or consideration would be to, is it more expensive or less expensive to live on campus? I would say the majority of our international students do live on campus for at least a year. But again, back to that cost of living in the community. Is it Is it more affordable to live off campus than on campus? Like, do I want to cook my own food? Do I feel like I could buy groceries cheaper than having a meal plan and stuff like that? Other options to consider is working on campus. So international students are able to work on campus for 20 hours a week. Um, and the starting minimum wage actually in Iowa is $10. And so that's $10 an hour for 20 hours. So you can make approximately $200 a week to put towards, housing, food, or even your tuition. There are opportunities for you to work off campus as well, but it has to be affiliated with your program. So say you're a computer science major, you would have to work in the computer science field or find a job in the computer science field in order to qualify to work off campus. And then one thing to consider too is applying to be a resident assistant. And a resident assistant is kind of the person that oversees a dormitory on campus. You're kind of in charge of the students that live in your dormitory. But the nice thing about being a resident assistant is you would then qualify for free housing. So a lot of things to think about, but again, there's a lot of opportunities to kind of get your overall cost of tuition and living expenses down to as small as possible. As far as like things to consider about to position yourself for a good scholarship, especially because it is merit based. So if you're in high school or you're just finishing up high school and you're thinking about applying to U.S. universities, like your academic performance is gonna impact your ability to earn those scholarships. As far as like when you apply to or apply for scholarships, we're I can only speak for what UNI is looking for, but what we look for in extracurricular activities is going to be quality versus quantity. So we don't necessarily look at students like, well, I participated in 10 different clubs. Well, how much effort are you actually giving to 10 different clubs? Like that's a lot, right? Versus, I was a part of 3 different clubs and a basketball team, and I was the captain of the basketball team, and I was the vice president of the debate club. To show more of those leadership roles versus just doing a little bit of everything instead of doing a few things really, really well. And then too, like with the essays, like you want to stand out, obviously in the world of AI. I know it's an easy thing for you to do to just write a prompt and say, hey, write me an essay for this scholarship at UNI. I grew up without using ChatGPT or AI, and so I think I can tell when someone has used it and when someone hasn't. And if you're having the director of international recruitment who's responsible for awarding scholarships and they can tell that you used AI, I would not say they're as friendly about awarding scholarships. So just keep that in mind as well. And then kind of like I said previously about meeting deadlines, it's important to get those applications in before the deadline so you can qualify for as much funding as possible. Again, these are the scholarships specific to UNI. So our International Excel Award is going to look at students' GPA and then also your extracurriculars. The Scholar Award is going to be based specifically on your GPA or your SAT score. The Presidential Scholarship is going to be for our top students, and they have to meet a specific GPA and they have to submit the SAT score. We do have a transfer scholarship as well, and that's good for students. If you're currently enrolled in a university in Kenya or even in the US, like we would grant that scholarship as well. Okay, now we can kind of segue in to preparing for your visa interview, right? So you've decided, I want to go to the University of Northern Iowa. I have secured enough funding through scholarships, work on campus, and my own, like a loan or even sponsorship from my family or government sponsorship. So you've decided, yes, UNI is the place for me. So then the next step is to submit your financial documents in order to receive your I-20. So the I-20 is a document that's issued by the university, and this document allows you to schedule your visa appointment. And like I said, in order to receive your I-20 document, you need to submit financial documents that prove that you have funding for 1 year of tuition and fees and living expenses. So tuition and fees for international students at UNI is 21,700 for undergrads. It's around 23 for grads, and then living expenses for housing and food is approximately around 14,000. And so for your I-20, in order for me to issue an I-20, you have to show me that you at least have $36,000 USD in a bank account or in a loan or family support in some capacity before I can issue that I-20. You can subtract any scholarship or graduate assistantship from your required funds that you show. So say you have to show 36,000, but you have a $10,000 scholarship. So then you only need to show 26,000 in your bank accounts. Okay, so that's something to think about as well. Once you receive your I-20, then you'll want to pay your CVIS fee. So your CVIS fee again is something that's paid to the US government. It's not paid to the university. And you will need to pay that before you go to your visa interview. Um, After you pay your CVIS fee, then you want to complete your DS 160 or I-60, and that is essentially your visa application, right? And so again, there's going to be a fee with that you pay to the US government. But then again, these steps allow you to schedule your appointment at the US Embassy, and then you'll want to prepare your documents. So the documents that we recommend students bring to the visa appointment is obviously your passport. You'll need your I-20. You'll need to bring your receipt for your CVIS fee payment. And then you'll want to bring your financial documents. You'll want to bring your admission letter from the university and any scholarship documents that you've received. And then I'm trying to think. Financials. I may have said that already, but yes. And then you'll obviously attend your interview. Besides that, I would strongly encourage you to set up a mock interview with the university that you plan on attending. I would say not all universities offer this, but UNI does, and we help students prepare. So I just did one today to make sure that the student felt confident about going to their visa appointment. So how it works is I act as the visa officer, and then I ask questions that we know that students have faced in their visa appointment. So you have to prove three things in your visa appointment: that you're coming to the US to study, that you have funding to pay for your education and cost of living, and that you plan on returning home to your home country. And so that's kind of like what we do in the mock interview is I ask you questions that the visa officer will ask you. And so it's an opportunity to practice. I have gotten feedback from our students that have said that this is a really valuable tool. I also think it's a valuable tool for students interested in studying in the States because, like anything, you can have like information overload, right? So if you go out on Google and say like try and find, visa appointment tips or visa appointment questions, like you're just going to be bombarded. But we've done our research. We've asked students who've gotten their visa, like what questions they were asked, how they answered them, so we can best advise students to do it similarly. So again, I know this is something that UNI offers and not every university does, but it's one of the things that we feel that is different about UNI and supporting our international students, and essentially just helps you gain the confidence that you need for your visa appointment. So that's what I have. I know that's a ton of information, and I talked a lot and I talked pretty fast. But please grab my contact information, or you can get it from Julie after today as well. I think there's a couple of questions that popped up that I can try and answer as well. Let's see. It says, does the institution still require an applicant to submit bank statements if he or she pays all the fees while still in Kenya? Um, so we do require it's not it's we require it because the US government requires it, right? So I cannot issue you an I-20 from the US government without receiving your bank statement. So whether you pay your tuition in full or not, like I would still need your bank statements on file in order to issue you an I-20. And then as far as like green holders, do they qualify for student loans? Um, that's a good question. I am not 100% sure, but if you're a green card holder in the US, then yes, I believe you would qualify as a domestic student. And domestic students are able to apply for financial aid, which includes loans. So yes, I believe green card holders are. Any other questions, Julie? I don't know if you have questions, or anybody, any of the other students, if you want to chat them or ask them, please let me know. I'd love to answer.
This might be just a tad off topic, just a bit, but I just wanted to know, is the same process same for masters? If you want to do your masters, is it like the same process, or are there some things that are a bit different?
Yeah, so for graduate students or master students, the process is very similar. Like I said, the application and admission process, you would have to meet the department requirements. But as far as like getting your I-20 document is the same. Like you would have to show that you have funding and that you have enough either through loans or personal funds or family funds to pay for 1 year of tuition and fees in order for us to issue the I-20. But as far as like what would the requirements for the U.S. government, like that's all the same. It doesn't matter if you're a graduate or a master's student or a bachelor student. Sure. So, you're always able to apply for your visa with your family. So in that case, like say you were married and you had 2 kids, then you do have to show additional funding, because if your spouse is coming, they're not allowed to work. And so you would have to show additional funding for them. We have found that visa denials are higher when you try to bring your family with you initially, because again, in your visa appointment, you have to prove that you're coming to the US to study, that you have funding, and that you plan to return. And so I think when students apply with their families listed on their I-20, it's a indicator to the visa officer that they are not planning on returning home if they're bringing their whole family. So we encourage students to apply initially as themselves, with just themselves coming, and then you can always adjust and have your family apply separately. um, It's not that the US government doesn't allow it. You can definitely still apply to bring your family with you, but we've just seen that visa denials are a little bit higher when students try to do that. Yeah, if you have everything in order, yes, because yeah, that's the point of the visa interview, is that the embassy essentially is like trying to see if you are an actual student. And so yes, that's the unfortunate part, is that you go through all this work, right? You go through applying to the universities, applying for funding, applying for the visa, and then you get to the visa appointment and it's 2 to 3 minutes long max, and then the visa officer just denies you. So no, unfortunately, it's not guaranteed. Um, and as far as like the family, I would say it's the opposite. Like you go through all that work, and it's a less probability that you get it if you have your family listed on.
I just had like maybe a two-part question. So on the return part, so if you want to, let's say, yeah, you're gonna study funding and then return, like you're trying to convince the embassy, yeah, for visa.
Mhm.
So if you happen to start school and everything, and then you get a job while you're there, what does that entail? Is there like an extension, or what happens at that time? And then also, just to put that like part B, if you are working, if you are studying and then you finish your 4 year, is there like a period, maybe a year or 6 months, for you to get that opportunity to look for work there, or how does it work?
Yeah, no, that is a good question, Trish. So, how it works with students' F1 visas. So, F1 is what we consider student visas. So, when you come to the US, you'll be on an F1 visa. You'll study for the duration of your program. So, bachelor's is usually 4 years, unless you're a transfer, and master's is usually 1 to 2 years. And then we to stay on your F1 visa, you are allowed to stay in the US and work for at least 1 year. So it's called OPT. Um, and so that allows students to stay on their F1 visa and work in the US for 1 year after they graduate. If you are a STEM major, so any science, technology, engineering, mathematics major, you can actually stay in the US and work for up to 3 years after you graduate. And yes, there is a grace period. I do believe it is 6 months. So you're given 6 months from graduation to try and find a job. And then if you can't, or you don't find a job, then you'll have to go home to your home country. As far as like working during your program, like I said, international students are allowed to work on campus up to 20 hours. And then there's certain exceptions about working off campus to stay in regulation with your visa. You can work off campus, but it has to be affiliated with your program. And so you would have to find, like, if you were a business major, you would have to find a job in the business world. If you were a nursing major, you could work at a hospital, or a CNA, or as a CNA in a nursing home and stuff like that. So definitely opportunities for you to work. I would agree that the website's going to be the best resource to find the details. But as far as eligibility, you will need to be admitted to the university. So in order to qualify for any scholarship, you have to be admitted first, and that's for undergraduate or graduate programs. So I really encourage students to complete the admission process first, especially, based on like, so for to be admitted to UNI, we only require students to have a 2.5 GPA, but we require higher GPAs in order to qualify for scholarships. So first eligibility criteria is to be an admitted student, and then the next is to kind of look at your grades. And like I said, we're merit based, and so then we would look at your grades and your extracurriculars and stuff like that. But yeah, like Julie said, I would just recommend going to our website, or even reaching out, and I can put my contact information back on here. And I can send you the links to our scholarship information on our website. Our application is online, so again, you can go to our website. You would need to complete the application first. It takes around 10-15 minutes. It's super easy. And then at the end of the application, it just asks you to submit certain documents. So you would have to submit your high school transcripts if you're an undergraduate or student. So you'd have to submit those. We ask for a copy of your passport if you have one. Um, because Kenya acknowledges English as a national language, your English proficiency requirement would be waived, so you wouldn't have to submit that. Although it would ask you for it, but you wouldn't have to submit anything. And then I'm trying to think, if you're a transfer student, you would have to submit your college transcripts. And then for graduate students, that is really department specific. So, like depending on what program you're interested in, they have different requirements. Some require, letters of recommendation, some require a writing sample, some require a personal statement, stuff like that. So that the graduate admissions are going to be a little bit different, but yeah, if you're interested in UNI, the first thing would be to get the application and your transcripts in, and then we would just kind of go from there to see what other documents we might need to process your application.
I just, maybe to take you back just a tad, I just wanted to know for the ISO document, like what are the funds that you need to look at so that you can have that cap for how much you need to have on your bank account? Like what do you look for exactly?
So, and on the financial statements, is that what you're asking?
Yes, like what makes you come up with like that 6,000 that you mentioned, but you can base it on the master's program.
I'm not sure if I'm 100%.
Okay,
Under-
you had mentioned like, for instance, you need to have like about 36,000 USD in your bank account so that you can be
right.
considered for the graduate. So just to take you back there, what makes you, how did that number come about? So maybe if you can do that.
Oh, I gotcha, I gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's 36,000 because that's the total cost of tuition and fees. So our tuition and fees is 21,700, and then living expenses. So and the living expenses is based on living on campus and having a meal plan. International students at UNI are not required to live on campus, but you would still have to take into consideration you would have to pay rent, buy food, and so we just use the cost that it would cost to live on campus. Um, so the cost of living is 14,446 to be exact, and so then so you just add those two together, and and so that's where I got the 36,000 USD. And then, like I said, you could subtract any funding or scholarships that you would receive. So, say you got a $10,000 scholarship. So, your total, tuition and cost of living at UNI is approximately 26,000 USD. So, then on your bank account, that's what you would have to show. Or you can have a bank letter issued saying, like, you know, Julie has been a client since 2014 and has 47,000 USD in her account and has been a credible client. So we're pretty open of what we accept, and then it would just like. And the other thing, it would be the bank statement or the bank letter would have to be from the person who is sponsoring you. So for example, if my dad was sponsoring me, I would have to submit his bank statement with that amount of money in, or a bank letter. If you have personal funds, then it's fine. Is it USD 36 for the entire period? per academic year? Good question. So the 36,000 USD is for one academic year. Yes. But that's all you have to show for your I-20 funding is just funding for one academic year. You don't have to show it for all four, but it is only for one. We do have an application fee. It's $50, but we do allow students to defer it. And what that means is that they can defer they can complete the application fee and defer the cost to their first semester bill, and so they don't have to pay it unless they decide to enroll at UNI. So you don't have to pay your 36,000 before you arrive on campus. So what I'm saying is how we break it up for billing is that you're billed per semester. So you're billed for the fall semester, which is August, and then you're billed for the spring semester, which is January. So say I apply to UNI right now and it asks for a $50 payment, but I don't want to pay that, then I can just say, hey, I want to actually add it to my tuition bill that I would pay in the fall. So then I can add that $50 to my first payment that I would have to pay for tuition in August. Yeah. Yep, we do not require students to pay for their tuition before arriving. We have what's called a business office, and they help students set up a payment plan, or, we accept international wires, and so there's flexibility on how, you can pay it. The first payment is usually due within the first 2 weeks of classes. Sure.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. I'm very interested. um, uh, I think just a follow up to what Philemon was asking. So if it's one academic year and then let's say the next year I fall short, or um, I don't end up paying, what does that mean? Is there like also a grace period, or am I like booted?
Yeah, good question. So, yes, unfortunately, there is a requirement that you have to have either like a payment plan set up, or you have to have um, only a little bit remaining on your account. So if you aren't able to pay your tuition, say for the spring semester, then what we do is we place a hold on your account. And so if there's a hold on your account because of finances, then you're not able to in or register for classes for the following semester. And if you're not registered for classes, then you're technically out of status. Then you're technically in the US illegally. But again, like I said, we have a business office that works extremely close with our students to make sure that they're staying on top of their bill, that they know that they have payments due. And like I said, we don't require it um, all upfront, and so you can pay a little at a time to help you kind of spread that cost. But yes, if you don't have it below a certain amount by the end of the semester, then you're not able to um, enroll in the following semester. Yeah, that is correct. Students are allowed to stay on campus if they live on campus over holiday breaks and summer breaks. But yeah, the cafeteria isn't open, so they would just have to figure out some other way for food. It depends. So like there are single rooms available, and otherwise, yeah, normally students have a roommate, or otherwise there's like apartment styles, or there's suite styles, where you would live with multiple people. Why it was denied, I know, I think that might be the most frustrating part, is like these students don't know why they were denied. And so it's like, how do you change to try again when you don't know what you did wrong